Welcome to my talk. I'm actually going to talk about how to get access to Lantronix devices. And actually vulnerabilities, I would call them problems, are much actually trivial. But I think exposure of these devices are quite big. So let me just introduce myself. I'm security Jedi at Diverto, and what I try to do is bring balance to the force. Well, since most of those on the LinkedIn have some kind of manager title, I decided to have such a nice title as well. Since we are not at the Star Wars convention, I will just tell you about my experience. I have offensive experience as a penetration tester, also defensive as a developer and system administrator, and have also few code in Nmap, Metasploit, OpenVAS, and so on. And I have authored some free software myself, which you can actually find on GitHub. And also, if you trust in, only in certificates, these are some of these which I gained through quite some time of career in information security for more than 10 years. I actually brought also some bottles from my lab. So if you participate, and I think problems are quite easy, you can earn some of those bottles for your lab. I also have a few sweets which I brought with me from Croatia, so feel free to participate. So what I will gonna talk about in these 45 minutes is I will tell you more about Lantronix and what you can do with physical access, and of course I will answer on the question what the heck is 77FE and about the problems in that protocol, as well as how to actually solve these problems. And if there's any questions, of course, I'm willing to answer, of course. So let's see what the Lantronix is. If you think, whoa, that's something obscure device, I never used it, I never saw it, I never bought it, or something, yeah, that's true. The problem is that actually these things vendors buy actually when they want to build something, and they just buy like ready-made component to actually include in their embedded product in some kind of control system and so on. So probably you never just went to the shop and buy Lantronix product. Anybody heard for Lantronix here? Okay, just one guy. So yeah, that's the reason why you don't know about it. What actually it helps, once you have, for example, some kind of embedded device or control system, and you have a nice serial connection where you actually control this system, and you want to get access to some kind of modern IP world, you actually take some kind of this device, so you don't have to implement your own TCP/IP stack, but you just plug the serial port. On the other hand, on the other side, you have like Ethernet port with IP ready-made, so you actually just expose that serial interface to the TCP/IP world. And this is usual how it looks like. If you just open some of those products, if you find something like this, probably it will look like this. There is some other lookalikes boxes, but usually it's like this. So you can actually find them as integral part of really nice devices, from security part, for example, in alarm systems. You can find in some kind of control systems for air conditioning, pool monitoring systems, sprinkler systems. So if you have probably some kind of these devices, if you open them, there is high chance such one of these devices are actually included, if it's, of course, accessible on the internet. I mean Ethernet. You can actually find a lot of those devices also actually accessible on the internet as well. There's also cool, like a lot of those who hack Roomba, like from iRobot, they usually also use some kind of these devices, like Lantronix, to actually connect Ethernet and then to have fun with it. So yeah, so it's really from embedded systems to the industrial systems. You can really find all those things, but it's not marked as Lantronics. When you open it, you probably will see something like this. So what they are running actually, that small thing is actually like mostly running Cobas. It's operating system from Lantronics, and some newer versions run Linux, where they actually implemented some new security mechanisms. And they support one or more serial ports. They also support in some versions like Modbus, so that's why sometimes it's used in industrial systems. And of course, it supports like 100 megabit Ethernet, because there's no point in having like gigabit Ethernet, because you are talking with serial connection with much lower speed. So if you have physical access to these devices, it's always like usual, so it's game over, right? You don't have to go get fancy or do some like tricks with logic analyzers and so on. If you have access to the serial, if you have serial access to that device, physical access, there's no password by design. So what do you need? You just need standard TTL cable or bus pirate in transparent bridge mode for UART mode, and that's it. So it's not fun so much. So this is kind of how it looks like. In this side, you see actually how it looks like in theory, and on the other side, you see how it looks in practice. So it's typical like serial connection, and yeah, you don't have anything how to access it. But if you look from the network, they actually have few services open. So if you do some kind of port scan on these devices, there is like simple web server, which is actually some kind of Java applet which talks to this protocol 30718. And it also have like telnet administration interface, and usually if it's configured, there is also SNMP. SNMP doesn't help too much. It have only like read-only, mostly information, disclosures, and so on. So, and if you look at the telnet interface, it actually looks just like this. Okay, just give me password. So not much interesting, but actually there is, of course, one port which is kind of interesting, because this simple web server also talks to this port, and it's kind of good. And how actually to find those devices? Okay, if you have physical access, you just take device out, break it apart, and look at what kind of components there is, right? Or you just ask, do you have some kind of those devices, if there's someone knowledgeable about it. And also, you can do like passive looking at ports which are talking, and the most specific port is actually this one, 30718. Of course, for active scanning, it's definitely you just scan for those ports. It should answer both on TCP and UDP. It can also happen depending on the filtering. Could be it's only UDP or TCP, but actually the access is same. The problem is you have to use conservative timing, because these devices are not so powerful. And also, if you do some kind of version scanning, vulnerability scanning on them, they will just break apart, and you can misconfigure the device. How I know? I tried. So it's definitely not good to actually just be very aggressive to them. So, okay, we got something like this. So what we will do? We'll look at this other protocol, which actually talks. That custom protocols, I guess you already learned from this conference. The guys at SecuRing also showed, and the speaker before me, that those are usually quite interesting. So actually, what is 77FE is actually just a hexadecimal representation of this port. And it's actually used protocol for device setup. It's proprietary protocol, and it's used by their proprietary software called Device Installer, which they use for actually finding device and setting it up. So this protocol is actually designed for setting up device, administration of device, and getting some kind of information from device, Okay, and it's designed for insecurity, yeah. So this is how it looks like sample communication. You have some kind of request, which is like 4 bytes in this case. That's usually some kind of command. And then you actually receive like some kind of response depending on what you were asking for. So how it looks like, okay, so this is like query setup request. You have like answer, which is usually just incremented by 1. And you have like, in this case, like MAC address of the device, and you have device type. So what is the problem first with this protocol? Anyone? I have few nice bottles for you. Okay, sounds good. What do you want? Okay, you're welcome. So there is also problem authentication. There is also like, it's a plain text. And yeah, a lot of problems you can actually find here. But let's see something more interesting. Does anybody see here some problem? No? Okay, let me help you. So this is again another query. This is IPv4. Okay, it says it can get you his IP address anyway. If you're connected there, you know it, right? But this is actually a simple password in plain text. So you just send one request and you get the password. So that's quite nice. So this is actually the previous work. Actually, I found it myself. But then, of course, when you start Googling it, you actually find that some people found it some time before, right? And there is like Metasploit modules already for it and so on. And for example, Rob Vinson wrote Metasploit modules, but actually in Metasploit, it got accepted some other module by Igor. So it's kind of interesting. You can actually find them, just dump the password and that's it. So quite easy. Well, yeah. But in my case, for example, a simple password was not set. So it was like a lot of zeros here, right? But again, it asks for authentication. In this case, you don't have too much options, of course. You go further digging, Googling, and so on. And what I found out is that enhanced password is in place. So they got it, let's say, a little harder. So you cannot get or reset that enhanced password easily. And by the documentation, length is bigger, right? So instead of just 4 characters, the password can be like 16 characters. And of course, this is a challenge. So this is what they wrote in the documentation. Okay, if you want to have better security, just use enhanced password, and length is like 16, and it's not visible in query setup, and everything is fine, and you are secure, right? Well, let's see how. So since I accepted the challenge, I said to myself, okay, so if that simple password was so easy to get, definitely there is some way to actually, some kind of access the enhanced password also, or just kind of reset it or do something with it, right? And this is actually, when I started digging, I actually found another request which actually also spits like a simple password. So in this case, you just send another command, and it seems like you just send any command, you just get the password. Well, I tried to send some kind of random commands, but this didn't work out. It's actually just these 2 commands. Well, maybe you will find actually much more, because I think I just touched the tip of the iceberg. The protocol is really, really simple, and there is a lot of things to actually find here. So further digging actually got me to some kind of request which says, okay, request to query configuration. If you send like a simple request 4 bytes, you get like setup record for each page you want. For example, if I want to setup record 0, I will send 00, 00A0, right? And this is what actually I got in previous requests, so it's not so interesting. But the other thing is actually they have like security record. And here actually they store enhanced password, AS keys, SNMP, and so on. So this was kind of interesting. Okay, I'll just ask for that security record and that's it, right? Well, actually wrong. If I just send like request for security record, it will just provide 0 bytes, nothing. So it's actually quite useful to dump whole configuration, except the security configuration. So, okay, this is, let's say, half interesting request, right? But further digging revealed another thing. So, if you just send a request to change configuration, if you just send like some kind of request again for 4 bytes and followed by how the setup record looks like, you actually setting those records which you want. And this actually works. So that means you can actually set security record in this. So that means you cannot get the password, but you can actually just set it to zeros or something. And this is how it looks like, right? You can actually put everything. So you said, okay, this is set setup record 1, send just this security request. Just for kicks, I put like SNMP community string to be default by public. And this is actually like AS password resetted, right? And if you send this specific request to Lantronix device, it will actually just say, okay, thanks, I managed to reset the record. So, quite easy. So, this is how it looks like when once you actually reset you can enter the setup mode. So, you can do everything what you want later, right? So, this was my guess actually for the protocol. First, of course, if you have enhanced password, it will always ask for enhanced password. If it's okay, you will get the setup menu. If it's not set, if it's zeros, it will go to the simple password. And then if simple password is fine, then it will go to the setup menu. And yeah, problem solved. So, of course, I developed a new tool which will actually do everything what I mentioned right now. So it will also help like with protocol implementation, because I managed to actually document all these things and what you can actually do, at least for the security part of the story. And it's kind of more security related utility. So you can get more of these tricks implemented, what I mentioned, but more security side, you cannot, for example, restore configuration and so on, but it's much easier to do. Because I think this is just really tip of the iceberg. And it's free software, so everybody can actually look and do with it what it wants. But it's actually quite good to draw attention to such device. And of course, you can actually download it from the GitHub. It's actually right now, you can download and see if you have something like this in your organization, because if you have, probably you want to do some kind of remediation. It's written in Perl. Yeah, I hope you will manage it, because I hope it's readable. So what you can do, okay, you can do all these things which I mentioned. You can actually just query the simple passwords, reset security records all, or you can just reset security records for enhanced password, but leave the AS key for communication between, so that you don't reset the communication itself. And you can of course like backup whole configuration, like just dump setup records, all the setup records which you have. In configuration, usually you can find, except like SNMP, passwords and so on, you can actually find serial settings and so on for the device itself. Or if you're brave enough, you can actually just have one command to rule them all. So this will actually do everything what I mentioned. Okay, so if you're still wondering why automatic scanning is bad for Lantronix, for example, this is the answer. This is one of the runs, and if I dump the setup records, it will get actually overwritten with random data from the scanners, right? So definitely don't do it, right? You can see that actually this whole mechanism of getting and setting the setup records doesn't have any like security mechanism to actually prevent something unintentionally happening. So this is another problem. And for example, if this is something kind of IP address, you will actually just terminate all the communication with the device. But since it's quite easy actually to get hold configuration, you can actually just get the configuration and change it and upload it back. So even from the network, but you have to disconnect it first. So correct way actually would be that you ask, right? Someone responsible if they could have something like this. That means if they have some kind of device, embeddable or a control system, and the best is actually just to check and send broadcast query packet to this port. And they will just reply back the configuration. I just made it in tools so you can send actually broadcast packets to it, so you can just get all answers to you once at the subnet and know if there's any device. It's quite useful if you're testing like, I don't know, air conditioning systems or alarms and so on. And of course, afterwards, it's good to actually dump setup records, because if something is done before, if you just screw with some packet all the setup records, you have to have the way how to just restore it, right? And then, of course, you can play. And afterwards, you have to check if it's still working. If yes, perfect. If not, well, you should somehow restore setup record somehow. Still, I didn't implement it, but I guess it's quite easy. So I'm accepting pull requests if you mess up something. So the problem is actually that it's not about Lantronix. Actually, they warned the vendors about it in their documentation. They clearly say, okay, for security reasons, maybe you want to disable this port, right? But the problem is, the vendors who actually just just take that device and implement it, and there is a lot of them. Really, if you start paying attention to this port and do a lot of testing in such field where like air conditioning and alarms and so on, those are all embedded, you will see that they are actually quite often and frequently found. And the problem is here actually disclosure problem. Okay, Lantronix knows because it's their protocol that it's a problem, right? And OEMs, it's actually hard to find all their customers and say, okay, you have problem, you have problem, you have problem. So I think here it's actually a different approach. So I think the best approach is actually to tell it on the conference, because I didn't see anyone doing like some kind of systematic approach to these Lantronix devices and didn't explain all the problems which there are. And on the other hand, also document like some kind of tool to actually just show to the customer that there is a problem with such devices. And I think then gradually it will actually all get fixed. But maybe on the other hand, Lantronix could make it better, right? It could add some kind of whitelist for those ports or some kind of encryption. That will be nice, right? And if you see like default security settings, it's actually everything what should be like disabled, it's just open. So probably it just added costs to the production, and probably they just don't care and just put in maybe for the customer or some kind of integrator, okay, you should do this, and it's never done. And it's quite good actually to check in your organization if you have something like this. So what are recommendations here? Well, it's definitely, since it's nothing encrypted, right, you have to have some other device to actually VPN or make some kind of SSL tunnel the service. And you should just tell it only through VPN or something like this because it's administration interface, or use some kind of secure channel. Definitely disable this port. It's manageable for setup, or you can just filter out on network devices to only allow the IPs, right? And there is also some other unnecessary services which it's just not needed, if of course you see. So to actually sum it up, yeah, this is what it looks like, right? When really it sucks, right? But in short, there are ways to paste beyond authentication. Simple password, enhanced password, whatever, on Landtronics it's possible. If just this port is accessible. So you have like tools in Metasploit Landtronics modules which can help you with only simple passwords, but this tool which you can find on GitHub, it actually helps you with simple enhanced passwords. So definitely you want to disable this port. Let me just show you how it looks like actually in action. Let me see if you can. Okay. So let's see if it answers. Okay, this is usually how it looks like, right? Okay, so yeah, as you can see, you cannot write much more characters than this one. And it's quite actually nice that if you have simple password, it will actually give you just 4 passwords. So you always know in which password mode you are. In this case, for example, if I just use the Landtronics witchcraft, so that script from the GitHub you can also obtain, and just write like, okay, now I just get like what type of device it is with MAC address, and in this case, for example, if I say, give me the password, this is the simple password, I just get a test. So if I do like, tell it to this port, okay, it doesn't work. So that means, right, that enhanced password isn't gained. So you just change one parameter. Okay, I got like, okay, successful security reset. And in this case, if I tell it to this port, it asks passwords again. Why? Because I have also set up, if you see, the simple password. Okay, so in this case, what I do is just retrieve this simple password, which was, of course, test in this case. So let's just connect to this port. And if I write test, okay, I'm in, right? So now I have all the access to the security, like SNMP. I can change IS keys and so on, right? And yeah, this is how it looks like. This is security of your alarm systems if you have them. Let me just scroll through this. Yeah, okay. So, in short, for the future, I think I just really touched the tip of the iceberg. There are really things to research, and I think by looking at the protocol and documenting it, I think I've made some kind of starting points to actually, for deeper investigation in this. Because there's probably, I guess, there is a way to obtain some enhanced password or AS keys directly and so on. Because in some requests, it really like, sometimes it spits some kind of random bytes, and sometimes I get the simple password in these bytes and so on. So it's definitely worth looking at it. So if you don't have anything to do, or you want to find something not so challenging, I think you can try with this. And you will have great success in doing it. So in short, who actually done some previous work, it's Rob Vinson. He actually done, all those guys just done, for example, those simple passwords. And my colleague, who is actually some kind of hardware wizard, Dalibor, he actually done those hardware parts. But the enhanced password, they never touched. So this is actually the first time actually somebody touched these problems with the enhanced password, and with quite good success, as you can see. Thank you. Is there any questions? I'm also accessible on Twitter. This is my nickname. And I don't know. I can also show you some other commands in the meantime, if you don't have any questions.
I would like to ask,
Sure.
how did you find format of this security record by
Okay.
trial and error only?
You can find some kind of Chinese sites with very old versions of it, and this record is kind of wasn't good, probably because for some kind of old devices. But then it was like trial and error. For example, I put the SNMP string and looking where it ends. If it ends, for example, if it just starts and so on, then I just trying trial and error, trying to put the right, correct position, byte position and size and so on. So that was actually kind of old documentation, Chinese websites, plus trial and error and guessing the sizes, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And what I want else to show you, it have nice help. So if you actually put something like broadcast, you can actually just get the passwords from all devices. So if you have like a lot of alarm systems, lot of sprinkle systems, control systems, device systems, you can actually just get everything from one query and not just get it. There is also like resetting those passwords with AES keys and without AES keys and so on. So yeah, I plan to implement actually Metasploit module, but this was actually for my playing and for actually playing with the protocol, so it was much easier for me to write it in Perl, but probably I will write all those in later in Metasploit. As Metasploit modules is already there, is some tools already for this. And of course, you can actually put custom IP addresses and so on, such nice things, right? Okay, I think we have one question from Alok.
Yeah, the question is how could you solve it? Do you have any ideas for the guys how to solve it? I mean, SSL is unfortunately not a solution for that. Since it's a small machine, it can't have enough entropy to create a valid key.
Well, yeah. The answer is actually they already have some kind of Linux embedded in some of the newer devices. And they actually have like SSH and SSL inside.
Again, that won't help. The
Yeah,
cycle is so weak that the only thing when they start up with their SSH, the only thing what they use as entropy is the time. And they start like with Unix time, maybe you have a little time drift, I pad that out, so that won't help.
Yeah, I have to agree, but then you also have like what I already said in previous slides.
Sorry, I'm too late, as usual. You know me, always late.
Yeah, so here is like recommendation. So what you can do, you can put some kind of other device to actually just VPN SSL tunnel the service, right?
Okay.
And you can actually tell it through VPN or use some other device before, or you can just disable this port.
Yeah, I saw this, but you don't have any magic wisdom for the vendor.
Unfortunately, as far as I know, no.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, probably.
So sorry, don't buy.
Yeah. Or you just have another device which actually just helps in this case, or you just take the Linux-based device which is SSH and SSL enabled, so you can do it. Yeah, the problem is, usually it's always problem with embedded because it's hard to upgrade, right? Yeah, and you can actually really find them if you start digging around. Yeah. Any other questions? I mean, oh, hello. Sorry.
Did I notice correctly that there was TFTP within those lists of services?
Yes.
What does it do?
Well, good question. I hope you will research.
Maybe my guess would be that it might be possible to update the firmware, which might be even more interesting because then you could exploit this device to connect to some other devices, possibly.
Absolutely.
For example.
I will dare to say possible, because it's hard to actually find any documentation. So this one was much easier for me. But probably if you just dig deeper, and I hope you will, probably there is some good way to actually upload the firmware, and then you can do much more fun
If
with it.
it's possible to
Yeah,
download
and
the
then
firmware,
definitely-
modify it, and upload
Yeah.
modified firmware, it would be nice to have such a platform that would be accessible over the internet.
Yeah, because definitely, then you could actually just modify the firmware and just disable that check that you cannot like dump setup record 0, and then you can actually dump all like AES keys and enhanced password. Because in this case, we can just get the simple password, but we cannot get the enhanced password. We can only just reset that record, and then we can just enter in. So, yeah, I hope. There is a really good things inside, and the impact I think is high because you can really find in a lot of devices, in short. Any other question?
Hello. Is there a list of products where this device is embedded in, or is it what kind of web server is used in this device? Is it possible to enumerate it and identify the products using the web server, like via Shodan or something like this?
Yeah, I can actually. There was like some kind of a Rapid 7 studio which didn't just touch like Lantronics. They touched a lot of those like serial exposing IP interfaces, and they just touched IP and they scanned, and I think you can find this studio. The problem is I tried to find on their website their list of references, so I can actually just go through the products and look at each one, but I couldn't find. So the problem is, I don't know. The answer is actually I don't know. I can just look at their like references, marketing materials where they say, okay, we use it like they said, let me see. And this is the public references I could find. So they said something like, let's see. Sorry. Yeah, for example, in this one, they said, okay, we are using it in pool monitoring systems. We have like pool sprinkler controllers, and those vendors just got some kind of awards for it. And in some kind of books, they mentioned also Lantronics for when you want to hack, like if you want to hack Roombas, buy Lantronics, and then it will be much easier to actually access it from the Ethernet and so on. So these are my experiences mostly in alarm systems, in air conditioning systems, and so on. So yeah. But unfortunately, if you can find some kind of reference list and can help, definitely will be good. But what the specifics actually, what you can find is these things, right? So you can look at those specific ports. There is also Telnet is answering on specific port with specific messages, so you can actually look at the Shodan, of course. And SNMP, if it's enabled, you can also look at the specific webs, right? And you will get it. And actually, here is also quite nice with web applet, because it's also serving like on a plain text connection. So that means somebody who is administrating, you can actually do man in the middle and deploy like your own applet, which will just dump the password or do something else, right? Or execute code on his client machine. So yeah, it's a lot of problems here. And it's really tip of the iceberg, as you can see. And I see you already have few ideas what else to do, so go ahead. I can help you with my what I found with protocol and so on. So definitely, this is just a starting point, I hope. And I hope it will get fixed somehow at different vendors and so on. So we will have secure product. Any question?
Just 1 second, okay?
Okay. Oh.
Is there a possibility to download a firmware of this OS?
Oh. I haven't found it, but maybe you will have more success. But it will be good, I agree. Then you can reverse it and see what actually happens. But it's really, yeah, it's just a starting point. And I think it's best to actually, if I just spend like 3 years doing whatever it will do, like TFTP, reversing and so on, I guess 3 years is too late. It's better to actually tell you incrementally what I found so far and start digging later, and probably some other people will join and so on. So
Have you talked?
this is my idea, right?
Have you talked with the vendor for at least to change the default configuration to close all the unnecessary ports?
No. No, I didn't talk with vendor because what I saw in documentation, they always say, okay, for security reasons, you must do this, this, and this. So it's more like, okay, it's more about vendors who didn't do it. Like they just produce for the vendors to actually do security as they want. And if the vendors don't produce and I don't have contacts from them, it's just let's say, boring game. Because probably they just disable to be easier for them to actually develop and then to just leave it. And it's always problem. So yeah, it's kind of problem with responsible disclosure and with these things because you don't know whom to actually say, right? You can contact the vendor, but vendor said, okay, I have it in my documentation. So I think it's a correct way. So please tell me if it's light or dark side of the force. Okay, I have one for you. And I have more, of course. So I hope I gave you motivation to actually start digging more. Any other question?
Okay, if not, thank you very much for your lecture.
Okay, thank you.